Welcome to all of you for coming over. I thank you all for coming. I hope you've had some food. We didn't run short of food. Has everyone had some food? My name is Dinu Sen. I'm the president of TiE South Coast. And on behalf of TiE, I would like to welcome all of you. I just want to say a few things about TiE, and then I'm going to hand it over to Anil Kripalani, who's going to introduce our speakers for this evening. TiE is the world's largest entrepreneurship organization. We have 61 chapters in 17 different countries, and we are one of the 61 chapters in South Coast, which is really Orange County and San Diego. Our mission is to foster entrepreneurship, and that's all we're about. We have no politics, we have no race, no religion. It's fostering. Our only religion is fostering entrepreneurship. And although our origins are from the Indian subcontinent, today we're a global organization. We've got chapters in Europe and Japan, all over the world, and we try and bring people together, and we help entrepreneurs form new businesses. Over here we have, I think of it as stools, legs supporting the stool, and we've got several legs. The first leg is this. Every month we have different speakers come and talk to us, and in the old days it used to be mostly telecommunications and biotechnology, but recently we've expanded our horizons. We've had oil and gas, we've had 3D, so we've had a variety of speakers from different areas come and speak to us about starting businesses. In addition to that, we have what we call the TiE Institute, and they're educational in nature. And you've got to be a TiE member. You've got to sign up as a member to come to these institute events, and we have 2 of those every year, sometimes 3. We also are the only organization in San Diego, as far as I know, that runs something called TiE, the Young Entrepreneurs. And this is for high school students, and we have typically about 40 high school students, and we take them through starting a business, entrepreneurship. So it's classes for them, and then they have to do a business plan, and eventually they have competition, first at the San Diego level, and then at a national level, and that's, or at an international level. So it's really exciting. I mean, these kids, the winning team gets to compete against teams from London and Brussels and New Delhi and Tokyo, etc. I mean, it's really a great opportunity for these kids. And that's something else that we are very, very fond of, and it's something that if any of you want to get involved, I would encourage you to get involved. So, I'd like to mention some of our sponsors. Our platinum sponsor is Gary Rayner, and our gold sponsor is Qualcomm. In addition to that, we have ATS, who's a sponsor, and of course we are very grateful for Janssen Laboratories, which is part of J&J, for allowing us to have the event at their site over here. I'd also like to introduce some of our charter members. We have Vani Chawla, who joined us recently. Vani. We have Marty Cooper. Marty, we're delighted to have you with us. Jain Hagat, Anil Kripalani, who's going to be moderating the event today. Nikhil, Naresh Soni, Mitch Mats, Kumar Sharma, Murli, and Deepak Shah from the Orange County chapter. So welcome them all. And just a word about the charter members. I mean, we basically, as far as I'm concerned, this is an organization we try and give back. And it's the charter members that we steal from. We are like a modern day Robin Hood. We steal from these guys so that we can do the sorts of things that we want to do. So these guys pay all the money, and I really appreciate the checks that come in from them, and thank you very much. So let's give the charter members out. And with that, I think I'm going to hand the podium. Oh, sorry. Our next talk is Winning in the Marketplace with Design. And I believe Deepa is over here. Where is Deepa? Deepa is a published author, and she will be talking next month. And what date is it? I'm not very good at this. Tuesday, the 25th of February. And March event, we would hope to have something on genomics. There's so much happening in the genomics front, so we go back to the life sciences part and we'll have a panel on genomics and talk to you about the different opportunities in genomics and what's going on and things like that. And with that, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dino. I want to first start with going Hollywood or Bollywood, whatever you want to say. Quite clearly, there's several of us walking around with these. I prefer to believe that when the shades are on, people don't notice that glass as much. But it's quite the talk, and I full reference. I didn't mean to pun on Qualcomm talk, but certainly Google Glass has caught the attention. They even call those who wear them explorers, and we're supposed to feed back what it means to our lives. And let me just say that I spent the last 3 weeks using this on the CES floor and elsewhere, and it's interesting how many people have come up and talked to me to see what it was like, and I've read both the positives and the negatives. But I started with this because it seemed a little much to spend $1,500 to try out something that is still, being tested out, but it's actually surprisingly good. And the whole wearables arena is bringing out so much stuff that it was important that we address this, and we were very fortunate to collect 5 panelists. You saw 4 announced over the weekend. I added another panelist who has a background from 10 years in this, Edgar Auslander. We added this or had this topic for discussion because it is hot right now. And I'll show you a few of the devices. I would barely scratch the surface in showing you anything in this arena. I had to take it off. I have to be able to see your expressions. And it's a polarized shade, by the way.
Besides, you look like a criminal right now.
So, kind of anathema to take it off, but I will. So there is this brand new arena with so many different types of devices. Every day there's something being announced. CES was a treasure trove of such devices. Will they be a significant opportunity? We are about entrepreneurs. So first and foremost, will they be an opportunity for entrepreneurs? Google is needed to come out with the glass. Qualcomm is needed to come out with Mirsol on watches, or a Sony, or a Samsung. But there's a lot of applications on the sidelines that I'm sure you'll hear our panelists talk about. And then there are other devices like Jawbone and so on that have been around, and they have new opportunities at minimum for smartphone apps that do something useful. So we hope it's not a passing fad, but it could, let's see. So this is the reason for this panel. Please ask a lot of questions. I have a few questions of our panel, but before I go to our panel, let me put some material in front of you. Just 2 days ago, this was sent to me through some Seeking Alpha article published. And here, although in our announcement we mentioned 170 million devices, I believe, Naresh, it was by 2017.
Right.
This doesn't quite match that, but it gives, it makes an assessment of what each device would cost. They said $435. I don't know where they got that from, but it's a hockey stick, all right. And I think this number, you do the math, is going to be small, because at minimum, whether it's watches or whether it is, bands, there are going to be a lot of devices. And again, our panelists will probably give you their perspective because they are immersed in this. So there are many new devices. Qualcomm Talk, Sony smartwatch, there's several of us walking around. We had invited Sony to come to this panel and they needed clearance from Japan. They weren't able to make it. Samsung was supposed to be on our panel, and they had an executive meeting that our panelists got called out. We will bring him back. Pebble, Kickstarter provoked, very, very popular. Google Glass, of course, Nike Up, that's been around for a while. Fitbit Flex, new devices from Fitbit. Scanadu Scout I had never seen it at CES, and I have a picture of that if you haven't already checked it out. And I don't know how to pronounce this, 4i Viva, but it's a Canadian Calgary-based company that has some interesting things. And Polar, of course, long-time fitness device maker that has some new devices with some new interfaces and looking at, and they've been around a long time, so they've ironed out all the measurement kinks, if you will. So don't discount a Polar. So I call these my collection of wrist-wrapped assistants. They do assistant functions, and today you'll hear about them from those who are responsible for some of these, or about putting in useful platforms on some of these. Of course, you have Nikhil Jain on Qualcomm Talk. That's in here. We'll hear about that. And you'll hear from Sunil Vemuri, who will talk about a platform that makes sense out of these devices. So these assistants will only be assistants, effective assistants, if there's something in it, not just a simple app, not just a straightforward icon, as the current products are being shipped, but something that processes, something that makes it, too good to miss, and brings the customer out. And of course, you see in red down below Pebble, again, hard Samsung Gear on the top right, and the Up, the Jawbone Up, and this latest Fitbit Flex. So these are all in the category of $100 to $350. And then, of course, in terms of monitoring personal health, this is that 4i Viva, and I found this just this afternoon, that they have actually taken the approach that they will support the low-power radio interfaces that are popular in this, so you don't have to worry about it. And they will also serve, I'll use the word, as a hub for all your devices, so that they can channel what information is collected by those devices into your smartphone, and then your smartphone, and then you get all the processed information, you as a customer who buys these. By the way, if you want any of these, and we'll get permission from the speakers, any of these charts, please ask. We'll be happy to give you. And we're videotaping it. We typically upload the talks to the website. So Polar and Scanadu Scout. This is not really a wearable, so I took a little sort of license there, but it falls into that category of new devices. Scanadu Scout, if I understood it correctly, and I barely had a few minutes in CES to see it from afar, you put it to your head, I guess left side, with your left hand, and it measures a whole bunch of stuff. Besides the temperature, it will measure skin, perspiration, and a few other things, blood pressure. So I don't know how it does that, but apparently it's the hottest thing. And I can't remember, I think it's probably about $250, $300. And of course, my shades, there's at least 4 of us over here who have them here. He's videotaping me right now. It's quite interesting. I used this for about 40 minutes of videotaping at CES. Battery is the limitation right now. but it's the picture quality in the sun, of course, is great. Outside in or in this light, it adjusts pretty well, and I think others can speak to it. It's a expensive, has to come down, but it's a nice machine. It breaks new ground. So Google is really looking and asking, and feedback is being given, and people are trying it out in hundreds of different ways, not just recording their lives. And now we have this just yesterday, I guess over the weekend. Brings up interesting things. Here it is. Those of you who missed this is Google Lens, or rather Google Contact, they call it, contact lens. And between two layers of that contact lens are the two chips, are chips and that antenna. And I don't know which air interface, which radio technology they use. Maybe somebody else has heard this already. It won't be Bluetooth Smart. That's too high power. Something, ANT plus, whatever, I don't know. But that is, and the intention is detect sugar levels, because the tiers are a good indicator as a substitute for the current method of pricks, pin pricks, of taking blood. But tiers are very hard to collect. And so Google's thinking here is put this in the eye and measure right there, within 1 second, a reading. And then, so the tips look like little sparkle in the eye. And then the reading, and this is where the subtending technologies, or how wearables, in this case, this is a wearable, and it's an insertable, I guess. And I guess maybe Ramesh can talk about all that too, under the skin, that Larry Smarr is walking around with, or others are. But there's a little, they're looking at a miniaturized LED that'll be like a little speck. So if it is off the range, it's going to display a different color. Now, I don't know what that does to that person's depth of perception at that time when they've got a sparkle in the eye and it's shining back at it. But it at least gives a warning. So that's the kind of thing. And so it's very, I'll use the cliche, it's exciting to hear this kind of stuff, and I'm sure they will be. So then the question that, and I spent the last 7 years in the M2M field, the machine-to-machine or Internet of Everything field. And maybe Nikhil and the others from Qualcomm, Jain and others won't like to hear this, but the smartphone may not be the center of the world. Certainly companies that I've been working with, been at, and those of us who made smartphone happen with cameras and GPS and all that got laughed at a long time ago. Now it can't live without it. The question now is that Google Glass or other such, that's capable of being the smartphone and the device that you have in front of you. And this is not something that I dreamed up. This is something that we actually drew up in Qualcomm a long time ago. The display that you hold in your hand could very well be, since you already got curved displays for smartphones, could very well be a roll-up display you pull out that now serves as an accessory to whatever Google and Google Glass or Qualcomm, headband or whatever else, that it could be the accessory. So there's a opportunity to see, both from a physical device, the components that support it, and the applications and the use cases. So I'm glad on our panel we have at least 2 or 3 of our panelists who are healthcare oriented, and I'm sure there are those of you here who know something about healthcare and can talk about it and can provoke the rest of us, the entrepreneurs or the would-be entrepreneurs that are here, or those who invested. It would be interesting to hear all that. I would be remiss if I didn't point out two people in this audience that I'd like to highlight. There is Arlene Harris in front here, paging pioneer from long time ago, Wireless Hall of Fame, and Marty Cooper, her better half, her other half, who just did a small thing called cell phone, pioneered portable cell phones, and is now our American royalty. Marty, take a bow, please. So there are others that I haven't called on like that, but I'm sure you have a lot to teach us, and let me now take no more time and introduce our first panelists. And I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. They'll come up, say a few words for about 3 to 5 minutes. I told them they could use some charts because those takeaways might be good for you seeing what they're thinking of. And then we'll go into questions. I have a few prepared questions. And then what I'm really hoping is that in between, after a couple of questions from me across the panel, that you would then speak up and ask. And that's what the panelists are here for. Some have come for instances to be part of this panel. Okay, so we've got at the very beginning, Nikhil Jain, Vice President and lead for Qualcomm Talk. You know, Qualcomm Talk is the watch that Qualcomm has been selling, announced back in September, I believe. Nikhil's work has affected millions of wireless devices that we use daily, and I know what he has done. He has led many new initiatives that have become key for Qualcomm, including multi-mode phone operations, the design of small cell technology for wide area networks, that now is really the push from Qualcomm is on the infrastructure side to get these small cells into in-building, into the homes, to provide a 1000x initiative, 1000x capacity performance, if you will. And what I know very well about Nikhil having done is open market handsets for CDMA in India that reduced costs of those handsets, which included the fisherman phone. I mean, we've heard about the fisherman phone, people off of the coast of Kerala that call in to find out the price of or which port to pull in, and cellular benefiting that. And then also his work in the interworking between Wi-Fi and wide area networks. Nikhil.
Thank you so much, Anil. Appreciate your introduction. I'm delighted to be here, honored to be here. So as I was preparing for this talk, I started thinking, what's the best thing I could talk about? And I think in the 3 minutes, what I thought would be most interesting is to tell you the story of how this watch was built in a big company like Qualcomm. And how we thought about it, how we went through those, what were the design decisions, things like that. So my talk is just going to be history. Unless, it's sort of historical about how we came in. I think through that, I hope to tell you what's different about it and how we got here. So I think it was about 2.5 years ago, my phone rang and it said Paul Jacobs on it. So I picked it up and he said, come up, and I went up and he asked me, would you like to work on a watch? And when the CEO of a Fortune 500 company asks you, would you want to work on something, you don't know how to answer it. Because if you say no, that wouldn't work in your favor. And then if you say yes, you have no idea what you're getting into. I don't remember what happened, but when I came down, I came back with a piece of paper that had 5 lines on it. That's it. Mirasol, watch, always on, few other things. And that's how this project started. So it was kind of, we were working on this display, and for a long time, we didn't know what to do with it. Okay, so we tried putting it in a bunch of tablets, and then iPad came along and said, tablets can be bigger, and power is not so important. And finally occurred that maybe wearables could be interesting. So I started thinking, okay, watch. What is it that the watch should do? Why should it be special? And so the first idea that came to mind was, well, watches were invented almost 150 years ago. And they haven't changed. So with this new technology, can you do something special? And we thought, well, the interesting thing about a watch is that when I walk up to a person, tell them a watch, he knows what I'm talking about. So we started thinking about time. And we said, okay, well, it doesn't have to be a watch. If the display is always on, it could do more than a watch. So we started thinking about this idea of an ambient watch. And so we started mixing watch with calendar, and watch with stocks, and the watch with, your heart rate. And it sort of started giving these early prototypes to people. The first one we gave out had a watch and a calendar. And it was a big hit, because in Qualcomm everyone's running late, and when they had a calendar and a watch, that worked together. And so that one really succeeded. And so we said, okay, the first thing this thing should do be a modern watch. And so the idea of its talk is that it's a watch plus something about the world. So we sort of looking at displays that show you your activity plus a watch, calendar plus a watch, stock plus a watch, bunch of other things. Then we said, okay, what's the second thing? And we realized that your wrist is some of the most sensitive part of your body. And so we thought, okay, when something attaches to your wrist, I have like a privileged connection to your body. And there was, we had these early get-togethers where people shoot ideas about what could a watch do. We were really struggling to figure out how can you make it different. And somebody in the corner said, it's a sensory interface to the phone. And we started thinking about this sensory interface to the phone and realized, okay, what it can do is find a very tight way to connect to the phone. But then how is this valuable? And so we started thinking of a watch as a system to allow you to give priority to people that need to call them. So let me give you an example. So in Talk, you can state people as favorite. And if they are favorite, then your watch buzzes differently. So I can make my wife favorite, and if she calls me, then the buzz is completely different when somebody else calls, or if you get an SMS, or if someone who's a favorite sends you an email. Ideas are, we are still working on some of these features, but one of the ideas is to make that email show up on the watch. Or a Facebook post from a favorite person shows up on the watch, but others don't. So we started thinking of the system. And the system became an important word, because now we think of wearables as systems. And as we developed this became an important way to look at. So this was number 2 thing that the watch did. And then the third thing it did was a way to measure. So we have an accelerometer that measures steps. Like we're trying to put out a release that wouldn't have step counting and things like that. And then also a mic that measured your ambient environment. So essentially, we finally settled on a watch that did these 3 things. So the aspect ratio is wrong, but the interesting thing on the watch, as we started building it, the Mirasol display is a very low power display because it works on the principle of reflected light. So Mirasol works on the same principle as a butterfly's wing. And a butterfly's wing has no pigments on it. So what they do is they actually have differential, when the wavelet reflects off the wings, the reflected part and the incident part have some wavelength length differences. And those travel distance differences produces color. So the Mirasol display actually uses ambient light. Now if you think about it, that means that when this display is on, it consumes extremely small current. So the first reaction was, let's take an off-the-shelf operating system and build a watch. But we soon measured currents on memory. And so if you take Android, for example, and you measure 256 current on a 256 megs of memory, just the memory current is more, so high that your watch may not last a day. So some of these watches in the market, for example, that are Android watches last a day and so on, some 2 days. So we had to design an architecture that was super low power. So we started with a very small memory. This watch only has 16 megs of RAM and very small processor. So when you put all those things, then the next problem is how do you create a UI that is as sophisticated as a smartphone? How do you create a system that's as open as smartphone? And so we started thinking about an architecture and a system that would work together. So finally, the watch actually connects to your phone, and then our APK is on the phone. So you actually program the talk through your phone using an XML-like language on the phone. And so in the end, what we have is this watch that talks to your Android applications on your Android phone through the notification manager. It also has a system called AllJoin that lets you talk to projectors and TVs and cameras that, and refrigerators and things like that have AllJoin in it. So I don't know if you had seen the connected home demo at CES, this watch was like talking to locks, talking to all kinds of things. And then what happened was somewhere in the middle, we also started thinking that when you wear these things, the system of wearables should offer you senses that were beyond your 5 senses, and Paul called them 6 sense. And the idea with the 6 sense was the ability for things to whisper to you and things to tell you or things to buzz on your hand. So we started thinking, well, how do you create an audio UI? To answer that question, we also worked on a pair of headsets that will also be available soon. And the way these headsets are actually designed to not block your ear canal. And so these are 2 headsets not connected with the wire. They also don't have anything that extends outside. So if you see how you wear them actually, they go over your ear like that. And they don't have any mics here, but they have a sound focusing technology. What we wanted to do was create something that people would wear for 2-3 hours while they were working. And so they have an extremely good audio system on it. And what we're looking at is building applications that sort of whisper to you. For example, a printer can tell me I'm here, but the noise is going to, the printer's voice is going to come from the corner and so on. Anyway, so why did Qualcomm do this? Our whole objective was to sort of show an example of how you could build these wearable technologies and actually present it and create a reference design so many people could take this design and build their own. And actually it has, we were surprised by the response it received. My favorite one was that Popular Science named it one of the top 100 gadgets to buy in 2030. I have to tell you why that was amazing, because when I was in a city called Dehradun in northern India, I could never afford a Popular Science magazine. But I would go every year and read those gadgets. And you can imagine how big of an event that was to see them. So anyway, that's all I had. Thanks a lot. I'll look for your questions.
All right, our next speaker is Sunil Vemuri. Is the Chief Product Officer at reQall. I should say, it doesn't say in the short bio over there, reQall is a spin-off from MIT Media Lab. Sunil will tell you more about this, but let me say that for 4 years he recorded every moment of his life. So when he wears his Google Glass today, he's just completely at home. At least it's not as big as the devices he's used before. He oversees product development and contributes to the company's product vision. reQall was co-founded by him based on the work that Sunil did for his PhD at MIT Media Lab. Prior to reQall, Sunil worked at France Telecom and at Apple Computer. His interests include human memory assistance, information retrieval, information extraction, visualization, knowledge acquisition, organizational memory, speech recognition, and interface design. In other words, everyth't you'd ever want to hear about. Please, welcome.
I also play tennis. Thank you, Anil, and thank you for coming out here today. So, yes, I've been working on wearable computing for some time now, for about 15 years, dating back to when I was at the MIT Media Lab. And at the Media Lab, 15 years ago, things were a little different than they were right now. Wearable computing then was actually a laptop in your backpack, and you carried it around with you, and it wasn't a piece like this. We would literally glue onto a pair of glasses an ocular piece, and then there'd be a wire from this backpack into our hand. So fortunately, technological progress, we've gotten where we are here today. But part of it is we envisioned a future where we would have wearable computing, and these are exciting times for all of us who started on this many, many years ago, because we're seeing the first commercialization of some of these products. And so this is in fact very exciting for me and my colleagues as well over there. So let me tell you a little bit about the wearable project I did. I built a human memory prosthesis. What I wanted to do was, envisioning a world where we had these these wearable devices, and we would record every bit of our lives. And as Anil said, I recorded several years of my life. And the idea was, would this be useful for anything? All these detailed recordings of our lives, and in fact, many of you may have various instruments right now that are recording your lives in detail. And we wanted to find out, could this be used for anything? And my shorter answer is, it is not a good idea to record your entire life. But we learned a lot of interesting lessons from this. So from here, I was focusing on audio recording, recording conversations, but I also was capturing a lot of the context, where I was, who was with me, my email, my calendar, even the weather. If any of these things can serve as a memory trigger. And then I built a Google-like search engine, so anytime I forgot something, I could just type a few keywords, TiVo back to the past, and replay these past conversations to find out if it was useful. And turns out it's useful in a few circumstances, but not everything. But from those lessons, and I was actually fortunate to get a lot of press. Certainly doesn't hurt to be at the Media Lab since they get a lot of press. And people reached out to me and talked to me about some of the problems that they were having, or some of the things that they wanted to have. And that's where we started the company. We wanted to build some of these technologies to make them commercially available and available to everyday people, so that when the next generation of wearables and context-aware computing came out, we had the toolkits ready for them. So, there we go. Here we are with, some of these devices are available today, and some of these are still a vision. And, and what we're seeing right now in the marketplace are the glasses, the watches, and the health monitors, the Fitbits. So, for our company, for reQall, what my current position is, what we did is we took some of the ideas, some of the successful ideas from the research that we started, and said, okay, what do we really want to offer to people? And so we manifested it here into things like smartwatches, glasses, mobile phones. And what you're seeing here is an example of smart notifications, which is one of the things that we think are going to be an important application for wearables. Right now, you're probably being inundated with various, for those of you who didn't turn your phones off or turn the buzzer off, I'm sure many phones are on vibrate, emails coming in, notifications are coming in from whatever, who knows, maybe you have some games that are trying to get your attention right now because they want you to play them. We didn't want a world like this. We wanted a world where we actually were, especially with these devices, are increasing the amount of opportunity and the amount of screen real estate that they're taking away from your attention. And can we figure out the best opportunities to bring these to notify you and save the rest for later? So for example, when I was driving over here today, most of my notifications were suppressed. Why? This is not a good time to interrupt me. just for the safety reason alone. We know it's illegal to do it in California. People still text. It still happens. But for me, all those notifications were suppressed. When I stopped driving, it brought it to my attention, said the following people have called you. Here are some email messages that have arrived, etc. And what you're seeing here is an example of an email message where we don't show the whole message. We show just the important part. Why? Because when you're talking about a wearable, you don't have an opportunity to have the full verbosity. You have maybe an opportunity for a quick glance. So part of our technology is figuring out, what are you doing? Second, it was important. And 3, are they saying anything important? So after we have all of this, what we says, let's make this available as a platform. We are not the only ones that have a few ideas on what would be good for wearable or context-aware computing. So there's a variety of things that we offer that enable these kind of applications. We built a few ourselves, but we're not gonna, we're not gonna restrict our toolkit to just us. So for example, what are you doing right now? Driving, sleeping, eating, what have you. Where am I gonna be going soon? Am I interruptible right now or not? All of these things contribute to towards the valuable things that the developers of applications on wearables and on smartphones can use. And there are a variety of other things here. I can go into detail of all these things, so I won't cover it all. But suffice to say that this is, we are taking that sensory information, incoming messages, incoming notifications, distilling it down to what really should be delivered on the limited amount of time, attention, and real estate you have on a smart device. And so, and this is just to elaborate a little bit on these things, on the variety of things that we offer, that we have built as part of this thing that goes on wearables. This is something that actually works. Anybody's is welcome to come, and I'll show you on the watch, and I'll show you on the glass the actual notifications that I receive on a day-to-day basis, including things like, prioritizing which messages I should get, when it should not interrupt me, etc. Allow me to respond, and all the associated context awareness. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And I'm wearing one, and my phone and my watch are hooked with the reQall, and it does suppress, and it gives you the summary and prioritizes who needs to get through to you. And you can imagine if you're in the car, then if we can extend that to picking up all the sensory information, and I mean sensors in the car, there's a whole lot that can be done with that kind of platform. Okay, our next speaker is a bona fide physician, MD, Royan Kamyar, is founder, CEO of Owaves. It's a brand new company, just came out of stealth. One of our charter members, Jay Bhagat, are you still here? Jay Bhagat? Yes, the founder of SkyTel. I should have brought attention to him too. He's, if you remember SkyTel, that's Mr. Jay Bhagat. He is on the board of Owaves, and he brought Royan to us. Royan is CEO of Owaves, which is a cosmopolitan lifestyle medicine brand. We want to hear what that is. And a company producing software tools and wearable devices that inspire and motivate the next generation to engage in healthy lifestyle activities. Its core technology, Wellness for DTM, sounds like a wireless technology, is a comprehensive lifestyle change and management system rooted in the cutting edge and growing science of chronobiology, the study of biological rhythms. Please welcome Dr. Kamyar.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the kind introduction. Very honored to be here with very impressive panelists. So actually I'll talk a little bit, we're still actually in stealth mode. We're quite a few months out from launch, so I'm not going to talk too much about our technology, show our cards just yet, but I'll talk to you a lot about the inspiration behind the company and where the vision is. So most of you might be familiar with these statistics, but if not, we should be. 2/3 of the United States is obese or overweight. 1/3 is diabetic or pre-diabetic, and almost $2 trillion is being spent on chronic disease care annually. And the key things with obesity and diabetes is we know that these are lifestyle driven, these are choices we're making on a daily basis. And this comment came out of The Economist magazine a couple years ago. You might have seen it. This was really kind of the call to action for me personally going into this space. This quote came from the New England Journal of Medicine in 2005, and this epidemiological study was done by UC San Francisco, Harvard, and University of Illinois. Unless effective population-level interventions to reduce obesity are developed, the steady rise in life expectancy observed in the modern era may soon come to an end. And the youth of today may, on average, live less healthy and possibly even shorter lives than their parents. So this has never really happened in modern human history that we know of, where the future generation is expected to have a shorter lifespan and a poorer quality of life than the parent generation. So that was a real call to action. And once again, you're seeing sort of the sedentary behavior kind of being illustrated here in this comment. That we're, our jobs are really, kind of forcing us into this. So we're kind of positioning ourselves, I think, in a pretty unique location here. So chronobiology, as Anil mentioned, is one of the key inspirations for our tool. Chronobiology is really a cutting-edge science. Even though a lot of the basic science has been there for years, it's starting to hit a clinical level, and we're starting to relate it to a lot of the chronic disease epidemics that we're seeing. And basically what this is alluding to is that since the advent of artificial light and the rapid spread of it, our sleep patterns are no longer dictated or synchronized with the rise and fall of the sun. And that has long-term consequences, especially as it affects sleep and then other parts of our behavior. American College of Lifestyle Medicine, this is another new phenomenon going on in medicine. This came out of the American College of Preventive Medicine, was founded in 2004. And basically, this is a direct reaction or response to the growing epidemiological trends that we're seeing. That basically what we need in healthcare is a healthcare system, not a sick care system. I'm sure many of you have heard that. And so we need to focus on preventive lifestyle behaviors. Wireless health, I represented there with WLSA. And then wearable computing is obviously a trend that we're trying to capture on, and why we were invited here. UC San Diego Center for Integrated Medicine also placed there because our system is actually capturing a lot of the mindfulness movement that we're seeing. So meditation, yoga. UC San Diego actually just a couple months ago became the first medical school nationally to require its medical students to take a meditation class as first and second year students. So this is actually, there's a lot of science growing behind this, and there's a lot of grassroots movement. I'm sure a lot of you have seen yoga studios popping up even in middle America, so it's happening. Just a little bit more about American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and I think this is really pertinent for the wearable computing crowd. Basically, there's a call here for a new set of vital signs. So the traditional vital signs, this is kind of in their charter document, and once again, this is the same way that ophthalmologists have been meeting for decades around eye disease, cardiologists have been meeting for decades around diseases of the heart. There's finally a new group of physicians coming around and saying, you know what, we need to focus on the basics. What are the basics? Exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress management. So heart disease is still the #1 killer in the United States. Sorry. Is this on?
Take the other mic.
Okay.
Just take another mic.
Sorry. Hello? Okay. So heart disease is still the #1 killer in the United States, and stress is arguably the #1 cause of heart disease. So stress is being recognized as a serious, ailment, something that needs to be addressed as a preventive health measure. And actually, another key component of this is love and spending time with our loved ones. That it's kind of sad that we need scientific research to show us this, but there's actually there's scientific studies being done that show people who spend more time with their family and friends over a lifetime have better health outcomes, especially for the baby boomer population is a huge concern because one of the things that spirals of depression and dementia a lot of times is the loneliness and isolation. So nurturing those long-term relationships is being recognized as another key preventive health tool. And basically what they're calling for in this charter document is a shift from viewing traditional vital signs such as heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate. For the average active human being that's not in a hospital acute care setting, these vital signs really don't carry a lot of weight. If my blood pressure, if my heart rate is 87 right now versus 76 in another setting, that really doesn't mean much, and it's not very actionable information. But if I know that I'm averaging 6 hours of sleep right now, or if I'm not exercising, my average exercise rate per week is close to 0.2 hours, those actually have a much more significant meaning in terms of my potential morbidity and mortality. So basically what they're calling for here is a shift in our focus, especially as we look to preventive health and treating people before they come in the hospital. So a shift and basically quantitating these lifestyle activities, which the Fitbits, Job on Ups are doing, and that's why primary care physicians are taking them up with speed. Just real quickly, because I know we're supposed to be brief here, this is just a little key chart about chronobiology. And actually, I'm not sure if many of you are here for Dr. Sachin Panda's talk. That was actually just a month or two before. And there's a lot of exciting science coming here. One of the things he's responsible for showing us is that when you eat may be just as important as what you eat. And so the timing of our daily activity patterns has a serious impact in terms of our risk for chronic disease and our health and well-being. And actually, NFL coaches and Olympic coaches are very keen on this and savvy about this and using it to optimize human performance. So there's a potential here for this to be a really cool platform for wellness. And then meditation, mindfulness, we discussed, is basically gaining more steam and being recognized through a lot of science and finally being adopted by Western medicine as a key preventive health tool as well.
Thank you. So I'm very grateful to the next two panelists. We had an emergency withdrawal from the panel on Saturday night, and I reached out to these two gentlemen and was happy that both of them could join us. Our next speaker is one that has been a TiE associated charter member and active member in the Bay Area for a long time. A couple of years ago he moved down here and joined Qualcomm. Edgar Auslander has been Vice President of Corporate Development and Strategy and Product Management at Qualcomm, focusing on pursuing acquisition of companies and chipsets product roadmap planning. He has more than 20 years of experience in venture capital and general management at startups and Fortune 100 companies like ST Ericsson, Intel, and Texas Instruments. I reached out to Edgar because I knew about the work he had done almost a decade ago excuse me for a minute, just shut this down. A decade ago in really wearables, long before wearables were a common term that we all know. So I'm hoping he's going to say something. I believe it's complicated a little bit because he has, since I talked to him a day ago, he has laryngitis, I think. But Edgar Auslander.
So yeah, I didn't prepare slides, so I hope I can make it in the talk. So in 2001, launched a company called IXI Mobile. The vision for that company was to transform the phone into a personal mobile gateway that would connect with a collection of accessories. For example, at the time, the camera phones were very bad, very poor quality cameras. So the idea was the phone would be the cellular connection with Wi-Fi on Bluetooth. And then you'll have a real camera taking pictures. And guess what? That camera could send the picture to a website that we called mypmg.com. So Facebook did not exist. And then we came with other accessories as an idea of, like, for example, a messaging device that would cost just $10 and would be very slim and very stylish because all the battery and all the intelligence, all the TAF, FTA and certification would be in the phone. And that messaging device anybody can do, any brand could do. So you could have all of a sudden all sorts of accessories that are stylish and brands rather than the technologies that were complicated to integrate for others. And then we thought, what about a watch? At the time, Microsoft launched a watch called Spot. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a watch that received stock information and things like that. Not very stylish, and the reception was spotty. So a lot of people made fun of that. And I pitched to mobile operators, hey, they are going to steal your business because there is a service revenue. So it's time to make money with a connected watch. And we launched a watch with Seiko. Of course, it was far ahead of its time. It was at CES 2003. At the time, Bluetooth was not so low energy. So now you have Bluetooth low energy enabling this to really happen. You have Mirasol that enables low power display. At the time, we had to think about what type of batteries we could put in these watches so that they last for more than a day. And we thought about zinc air batteries and things like that. And we launched this. It's something called, I think it's kind of good with the theme of today. It was the wearable watch, which was, I think wearable has potential when it's aware. And so it was not to do wearable for the sake of wearable. It was whatever device or accessory fits better for ergonomics or for the use case you have. So for example, you have, if you want a big display, the display can be a dumb display in front of you, and all your connection is the phone. And it's a bit what Anil was talking in the introductory speech. He said maybe all the communication will be in the glass and your phone will be just a display. Personally, I believe that you need a lot of battery and high power, and that's not good in what you wear. So it's better in something you are used to, which is a phone. But our vision was to the extreme of having the phone without a display. It was probably the ability to have a personal mobile gateway as a bug you have in your pocket or in your purse. And then when we had all these devices and accessories, we had even a pen where you could write, and whenever you're done writing, you press the pen, and via the phone it transmits whatever you've sent. So there were a lot of things like that, but then we ran focus groups all over Europe and the US. It was an Israeli R&D based startup and headquartered in Palo Alto. And what was interesting is in different countries, different care-abouts. So some people were afraid that they'll have too many devices, so they'll be stolen. Some people were wondering, how do I charge all those devices? So we had this idea of doing wireless charging, and you'll have a phase where you put all those devices at night. And I just saw that at CES, Intel displayed this. Maybe I should ask for royalties. So these were all ahead of its time. So the big lesson is all about timing. And I believe that there is also something else which is probably a takeaway, is your phone has deserved the right to be in your pocket, like your wallet, or in your purse. When something is wearable for a few minutes, style doesn't matter, and you can have functionality overall. For example, if you're a doctor that need to have an operation on the body and you have to wear glasses to have augmented reality, those glasses can be ridiculous, it doesn't matter. Because anyway, you wear it for a little time and you are in the operation room. However, if you go outside, then you have to connect with style. And that was the pun we had at the XI Mobile. So connect with style, but also you have to deserve the real estate. So here, I have a watch. If another watch comes in competition with that, it has to be more stylish than this, or it has to have a social brand. I see some of you wearing jewels. We had this idea of intelligent jewel, but again, it has sometimes limits. Then there is this idea of something that doesn't have any, something that people won't even think about not needing, is anything that saves lives. So that too, you can compromise style if something saves your life. And I think in wearables, you have two categories of health-related devices. You have those that are for the people who are very well being, and it's the quantized self. Like, I run so much, how did I do? And then there are those that need this because they have a heart condition or something. And this is also very important. I see here earpieces as well that were displayed. That's great, but if you have the hearing aid, for example, then you are not going to remove the hearing aid to have that. So it's all a matter of like competition for real estate on your body, competition for style. And these are my first thoughts. I'd be happy to answer questions you might have. By the way, I'm very happy Marty's here. There was a conference we did about this personal mobile gateway. It was in Amsterdam in 2003 or 2002, and I met him there, and I still have the picture. So, thank you.
Thank you. See, I knew that wearables bring in style, so we had to bring in somebody from France and somebody with a Swiss-French accent to really bring some credibility to it. But now I want to come back to health for our last panelist, and again, as I said, I'm very grateful that he joined. He really should have moderated this panel because he knows just about as much about personal health, communications, computing, and tied to yogic thinking. And every one of you knows him already, Ramesh Rao, Professor Ramesh Rao. He is currently the director of the Qualcomm Institute of Cal IT. So this is not a third Qualcomm speaker, he just happens to be funded by Qualcomm. In 2004, he was appointed the first holder of the Qualcomm Endowed Chair in Telecom and Information Technologies in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the Jacobs School of Engineering at UCSD, where he has been a faculty member since 1984. And he's also served as UCSD's Center for Wireless Communications. He's done a lot of work. His full bio is on our website. So Professor Ramesh Rao.
Well, thank you very much, Anil. I appreciate the opportunity. I think you started out by saying that we had 3 to 5 minutes each. So I stand between you and the question hour. And what I thought I would do in these few minutes is sort of react a little bit to the latest developments in this world of wearable devices. It was delightful to see all the new things that CES showcased. So what I'm going to do is talk briefly about what is it I'm still missing, even as we make this progress. I think the displays look spectacular. I think battery life is a lot more than it used to be. It used to be about 90 minutes when we first started experimenting with them. There's lots of radios that allow you to connect these wearables to various sorts of sensors that you might have. But what I'm missing is enough computational power so you can actually execute programs on these wearable devices. The way they are currently marketed, they come across as notification devices. You know, it's solving the last foot problem. You know, so you don't have to pull out your cell phone from your hip or from your purse. But the ability to talk to lots of sensors and the ability to compute things, I think, will take us into a space that I think the current wearable devices are not doing right now. And that's behavior modification. You know, if you can get this communication going at some point you can start to provide feedback that will help people modify their behavior. Some of you have heard me talk in the past about my own personal experiments. I don't want to repeat them, but just to sort of update you, we're able to find data by working with our faculty in the medical school that reveals how you might actually be able to use these wearable technologies and ubiquitous, a lot of data gathering, the usual benefits of having such devices in a couple of very interesting contexts. Let me share one. This has to do with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So we've been in discussions with our colleagues in the VA hospital. I've learned so much. So apparently 1 out of every 3 Marines and every 3 individuals from the DoD armed forces that reports to a VA center for any kind of health disorder suffers from PTSD. This is a huge sort of epidemic. And interestingly enough, they've been doing studies. There's one study that I was just sharing with some people called the Marine Resiliency Study, where they've been tracking about 3,000 Marines from the time they enroll in boot camp through their deployments and come back to see what predictors you might be able to extract that might tell you ahead of time if they're more likely to suffer from PTSD. Right? Huge impact. You can see all sorts of value that would emerge from this. And interestingly enough, these devices, these sensors that you can attach based on preliminary work that we've done, seem to be able to predict, when something is about to strike. They suffer from these phobias and sort of bad memories that recur at unexpected moments. Many of them lose their driver's licenses because they can't be trusted to be driving a vehicle when they suffer from this condition. So if you could get advanced notification, a few minutes before it happens, you can pull over. Right? So the kinds of spaces you can go into, there's a similar study with eating disorders, binge eating. So anything that affects your body, throws out signals that you can easily track. And if you have the ability to compute on this, so it's not just measuring the obvious things like heart rate, but you have some algorithmically derived measure that you can extract from it, I think you can go into behavior modification. So this is what I'm missing in the current crop of devices. I'm sure it's just a matter of being able to make the case clearly enough, and with the deep connections that we have with our local talent, maybe we will get to the point where what happened in 2010 with the Microsoft Kinect device can be reinvented. I was just in a talk earlier today. The story, the version that I know is that Microsoft didn't want Kinect to be an open device. They wanted it to be tied to the Xbox. And after some of you know the story, after the Kinect device was released, there's this little group called Adafruit, I think, odd little name. They announced a bounty, all of $2,000 for the first person who could hack that interface. Microsoft then came out with a release saying they're going to use law enforcement to make sure the integrity of their product will be preserved. So this little group upped the bounty from $2,000 to $3,000. And in 4 days, somebody hacked it, right? And the talk that I was at earlier today demonstrated what a huge impact it made on the research community. Everybody started using motion sensing to do all sorts of things, from medical applications to teaching people how to play music. So you got to be able to liberate these products and let people who are in sort of the creative business, most universities are in this business, take these things where they will go. And Microsoft had the foresight very quickly to back off. And I was also amazed to discover that actually the person who planted this idea was one of the Microsoft engineers who worked on that product and couldn't sell the idea of opening it up his chain. So he called somebody and said, hey, why don't you try this disruptive approach to innovation? So I think the power of these wearable devices is just extraordinary. But I think there's a lot more that we can tap out of these devices if we open things up and allow certainly
There you have it. I'm usually good with time, but today this is such a wide open area, and and just the interest that is represented in this room, I wanted to allow the panelists to have a chance to talk about their perspective. I have questions, but in being mindful of the time, I want to go straight to you. So very first question, Naresh.
What is the one most killer app for wearable device?
If you suffer from diabetes, it's probably something that prevents you from dying. So it all depends on the mind.
Were people able to hear?
No.
Edgar said if you suffer from diabetes, then something that prevents you from, I won't say
That's
dying,
not-
but something that prevents you from dire consequences would be a
Continuous
killer.
glucose monitor.
And Royan, you want to add to that?
Oh, I was just, if someone has diabetes, then a continuous glucose monitor is probably their
Yeah.
favorite app.
The
That-
killer.
Yeah, the killer. I would say that, pedometers have made tremendous impacts, and Fitbit's getting a lot of adoption, and that same underlying technology is being used to monitor sleep. And so I know, I had mentioned that primary care physicians are taking it very seriously and recommending it to their patients, and I think it's pretty impressive what they've done.
So, let's assume some unscrupulous industries don't take over, the wearable computing as they did with the internet and other technologies. But, my comment is somewhat self-serving because I think I'm working on the killer app right now. And I think driving is an example of driver safety and limited interruption, and just being able to get people, allow people to be focused. Use these technologies to not disrupt people more, but to be more focused on what they're doing, paying attention, enjoying this meeting, and then after I walk outside, okay, fine, let me get the flood of whatever everybody's, whatever fires I need to put in.
But Sunil, can I be provocative?
Use the mic.
Why-
Edgar, use the mic.
Yeah, to be provocative, I wonder why in the car you would need wearable, because that's distracting.
No, I agree with the wearable is distracting. You don't need a wearable in the car.
Right.
Actually, the first time I wore this, San Diego, I guess I shouldn't admit it, around San Diego police officers, wore this in a car, it was extremely hazardous. I actually find this thing to be much more dangerous than a phone. So I'm not saying you should wear it. I'm saying that people actually will, people will check their phones despite whatever, people will do unsafe behaviors no matter what. And if we're gonna do unsafe behaviors, well, how can we actually encourage safety? If I had an opportunity to to discourage children or teenagers from texting while driving by simply saying, okay, you know what, you're not going to get the interruption while in the car, but as soon as you're finished, hey, on the watch, that would be fun.
Anyone else want to say?
So, this was a trick question. So let me say, I think, and I'm going to take from Edgar's speech, but I think the killer app for a wearable is that it has to be wearable. And essentially what that means is it has to be small. And the small for a watch means low power, for example. And low power is, low power is not important, but what low power does for you is makes the technology transparent. And so it gives the designer the ability to make it wearable. So it's not important that the watch lasts 7 days, but it's important that it be very small. And so to me, I think the most important, wearables will do many different things and they might do something special for someone. But the most important thing is that they have to be wearable, which means cheap, small, beautiful, tolerable to wherever you put them.
So very briefly, if I could add, I think what makes wearables unique is that it's in contact with your skin, right? So I would like, for me, a killer app for a wearable device is something that senses things off of your body and that also delivers tactile feedback. No other device can do it as easily. So an application that combines these two things.
The sensory connection to your body.
Arnie?
I'm curious about how you feel these devices are actually going to get to market. One of the biggest problems you have with consumer devices is how do you get the public educated? What channels do you go down? What are the commission structures? Where's distribution points of presence? Is it done on the internet? Is it Amazon? Is it whatever? How are people going to actually create a hockey stick effect, or will that ever happen? Is it going to be a gradual thing? Are the medical devices going to come through medical channels? The doctor's going to recommend them? Going to be buying medical devices at Best Buy? Does anybody have a...
Before you answer, were you able to hear back there Arlene's question? By the way, and Arlene is, you've heard of Jitterbug, the service, Jitterbug. She was the founder of and longtime CEO of Jitterbug. So anybody on the panel want to, go ahead.
So I think this is a problem that we have to always answer as Qualcomm, because in Qualcomm, if a business doesn't turn into billions of dollars of NPV, it's in number 500 in the priority list. So our vision is that we don't think just because Qualcomm made a one watch, this is going to get us millions of watches. So what we really tried to do was to create a design that we could give to anybody who wanted to make a watch. So essentially, as a next step, we're trying to make it such that anybody can take pieces of it and make a watch with very low initial costs. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think you asked about distribution, and I think each variable would have some angle that's really unique. So for example, we did the headsets. I think the unique angle of headsets are they play beautiful music. So we would have to find some musician who really thinks of these as amazing and uses that clout to sort of drive adoption. So I think it's a combination of two things. On the upscale side, supply side, we have to create technologies that sort of scale. And scale means use components that can be built in millions, miniaturization. So we are actively involved in trying to make every component in the watch very small so that anyone can sort of put these pieces together and make them really wearable. And then couple them with a marketing channel that takes advantage of applications that are specific to a purpose. So a Twitter feed for some celebrity. So it's a Twitter watch that sort of shows you what this person's doing. And then you create many such segments, that's how you sort of scale. That's our vision for it.
I think you asked a very key question, because most of these technologies are developed by nerds for nerds. So the problem is, for example, when we have to do pairing, even that is understood only by people in this room probably, and a few Silicon Valley and wireless experts. I remember the days of when the phones were launched and you had to press no to make a call or something like that. It's really the user interface is terrible. And so when you go to an operator store, they are used to sell a headset and a phone. And then when it goes beyond that, it's complicated. So in the Apple store, you have a different experience, for example. But Apple aficionado, but it's extremely important that the use case is very clear, and when you turn on the thing, it works automatically because it's already prepared and or prepared. And I think you're right that this is underestimated, the difficulty of going to market, but also of everybody mass using the devices. And some even ask for more simplicity. So,
Sony is selling its watches directly through its UTC store. So I don't think that's a bad model, but whether it reaches the full extent. And Verizon is selling Galaxy Gear watches. That's, of course, there's a flaw there because it's tied only to Samsung phones, Samsung Android, so it might be a limitation. This is not tied to any particular type of platform, so I think it kind of is a better model.
Sorry, I just want to, just one more thing with that. Crowdfunding has actually been a really useful tool for a lot of these companies to get noticed and build communities around them. So Pebble smartwatch, arguably started this kind of level of interest that we're seeing in the space, and they were trying to raise, I think, somewhere around 100,000 and came out with $10 million from their Kickstarter campaign. And beyond that, they had not just market validation, but they built a community that they kept in touch with throughout the early development process to get constant feedback on what features to add and where to go with the different color straps, etc. Scanadu Scout was another company I was mentioning that made their launch through Indiegogo campaign, and once again, they raised well over $1 million through their campaign.
Anybody else on the panel take that question? Otherwise I'll go. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask Dr. Kamyar, you mentioned about chronobiology, and I think that's a really underappreciated area of medicine. What is your vision? How will you monitor somebody's testosterone level, or when the stomach is going to empty,
Right.
or
Yeah.
when the sex drive is high? How are you going to monitor
Right.
this?
No, that's a very difficult question. We do have advisors from UC San Diego Center for Chronobiology, and ambient light is actually one key tool that they're using to kind of gauge where someone should be with regard to their circadian rhythm.
How about sleep? How will you monitor when somebody's
Well,
trying to fall asleep or wake up?
Sleeping is being done through 3-axis accelerometers, the same underlying technology that's in the Fitbit and the Jawbone Up, and let's see, there's a couple other companies out there, but basically that technology and that know-how has already been done, and it's been used in the research setting for quite some time. In the scientific and by chronobiologists. They used to have to use very large actigraphs, they call them, short. But basically they got the technology down to a very usable size, and that's what the Fitbits and Jawbone
What is your company going to work on to monitor on a wearable basis?
Right. So I think the monitoring of that piece of the equation will be pretty difficult. What we're trying to do is actually provide kind of a roadmap for optimizing, let's say, your circadian biology. Basically, taking a lot of the know-how that's being implemented in, say, Olympic training or NFL athletes, and when's the best time to eat, when's the best time to sleep, when's the best time to take a nap if you need a nap. All that can be used basically to optimize our physiology. Basically, make people healthier is kind of the goal. So.
That's really way out in the future. I don't think it's like immediately.
Well, I think the monitoring piece, it would be difficult and it will take some time. But there are proxies. So blood pressure, for example, Omron's working on a wrist-based device that can measure blood pressure, and blood pressure has significant meaning for that. Skin temperature, body temperature has a huge implication for skin rhythm. So if you start bringing all this information together, then all of a sudden you can start making reasonable assumptions.
Sounds good.
Next question.
Yeah, as a physician, I take care of patients with diabetes. Some of them have PTSD or they have kidney complications. So there are a lot of different variables that come into decision making. So it's not just blood glucose or blood pressure. So getting back to Ramesh's statement about behavior modification and bringing together all these different data points to come up with some kind of solution to an individual. How is that moving, and do you see this data coming together and then giving some actionable information that is built on some kind of logic? How is that process moving?
So I think that is a difficult line to cross, because as soon as you start making recommendations, actionable decisions for a patient, you get into a lot of FDA issues. So that's basically, I think, going to take a lot of time. That will have to go through an FDA route, and physicians will have to be on board, and that will take some time before devices are actually making recommendations to a patient in terms of what action they should be doing at a specific time, especially with regard to medications. But I know diabetes is obviously in the forefront, so I can't speak to exactly where we are in terms of crossing that line, but there's companies I think believe, WellDoc, for example, I think has been doing a lot in this area. And I know they're going through the FDA route, but as far as I know, it's going to take physicians a while to kind of green light that process, and they will have to be behind it, because ultimately someone has to be responsible for the patient, and someone has to take that legal liability if something goes wrong. So I think that's going to take some time.
Just a comment about sleep on the earlier question. So Dean Ornish is one of the early warriors in the behavioral determinants of health. And he does not focus on sleep at all. He focuses on healthy eating, healthy exercise,
But
healthy
that's
social
not right,
relationships.
because sleep is...
Well, I'm sorry, let me just finish.
Okay.
And what he has found consistently is if you follow the basic healthy habits during the day, you have a very, very healthy sleep pattern. And it's a derivative of your awake habits, not a separate activity. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for confusion about what the role of sleep is.
No, it's not clear, but I'm not so sure that what he says is correct. I mean, I think sleep is a separate issue. And, sleep it's a chronobiological event. When the sun goes down, the body rhythm starts changing and, you start setting the stage for sleep. So I'm not sure if
Ramesh?
that's true.
Yeah, I think you were going to respond all to the earlier question. I missed you. I'm sorry.
I was going to respond just a little bit more to Kumar's question. I think there is a dearth of well-annotated data. So as you start to build these sensors and collect data, you have to make sense of it. And to some extent, you need the people who are wearing them to actually give you additional information than what they're currently doing. And actually, I think you need to build tools that will do the annotation, kind of like live blogging type of things. Make it easy for you to extract that information. So I think we're in the early stages of figuring out what to do with all this data.
There was a question. Okay, go ahead.
So look, in regards to wearable, like the way I see it, you have glasses, you have earbuds, and a watch, right? Wearable is something that you wear and you take it off. If you thought about something that's part of your body, like a tooth implant or a submolecular, something in your blood, or a hair transplant, that can be, it's not wearable, it's part of it. And then you work it out and you have a constant monitoring and computation.
I've thought about hair
He has
transplant.
some specific. We'll find
It's
out.
been experimenting. Last to share. No, we didn't talk about it today, but the researchers at UCSD who've been, and other places I'm sure, have been talking about epidermal electronics. So it's like a tattoo that you apply that will collect ECG, EMG kind of data persistently. Even gather energy from ambient radiation. So there's an antenna that basically sucks up energy to power the electronics. Lasts for 2 weeks at a time, and you washes off, and you reapply a new tattoo. There are also people who are talking about self-powered. This one blew me away. Patrick Mercier. There's different cavities in your ear, and the potassium concentration, ion concentration in different cavities are different. So that becomes the battery. So you can have an implanted hearing aid, which actually sucks a few joules out of your ear. And they've actually experimented with animal models, toads, and it works. So you can power a whole transceiver using your own body's natural. There are people who talk about using the ATP, sort of like an engine that is driven by tapping into the body's metabolic pathways. Yeah. So.
Actually, I've spoken to somebody who was doing a small implant and they needed power. So we have a wireless charging technology. So you sort of wear something on your wrist which powered the implant to sort of get information out of it.
Well, more like part of your body that it's normal, right? That's not putting implants and other stuff. I'm just talking. That's
So-
what it's.
So before I go there, I want to, because I will run out of time. For those two of you who've come from the Bay Area, stalwarts, what's going to happen? I mean, comment. Maybe Nikhil, you want to comment too. Apple, and continued work from Google. Any comments on how that's might change, the whole industry or wearables segment? iWatches, long awaited, and who knows what else from Google.
I have no specific knowledge of their plans. Let me first put that up front. But certainly they're going to be important players. And the industry talk is that they're sitting and waiting and watching carefully, no pun intended, for what's going to happen. But let's face it, they're going to, when they decide to go in, they're going to be significant players. I mean, in terms of actually distribution, to the earlier question, I mean, look at the channel that these two companies have and the opportunity that they would have to really put things out into the market in ways that other companies can't do. And also, these companies, while it may not seem, they are acquiring companies also and stitching together little plans here and there. So if you watch carefully at those movements, you can see that they're going to do something. They're going to do something soon, but they haven't revealed their hand fully.
Back there with a question. Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to ask that what kind of role the
Were you able to hear the question?
Yeah. So when I was at the MIT, we did a number of projects on this topic. Anywhere from giving, having children have devices that indicate when they are outside, sort of like a virtual leash, if you will. So you know if your child, exceeded beyond a certain radius, and various other projects where children are, interacting with with other people through the wearables that they have on. So then there's a set of things which are putting wearables on children for the sake of knowing if they've been kidnapped, things like that. We didn't do a lot of experiments on that particular part. Actually, I don't think we did any on that particular part. But in terms of being able to know where children are and to know that they're within a certain radius and to be alerted. Those projects were fairly successful, especially when they were done in an experimental sense. Media Lab did not put those out to market, though, so these are research experiments that happen.
Actually, I have an example where, I don't know if you've heard stories about connected glucometer, but I have some friends who are type 1 diabetic, and their kids are type 1 diabetic. And I think when these connected glucometer came out, it really changed diabetics management for them, because the glucometer required the child to test in school. And if they didn't test, mom would know that they didn't test. And if they tested and the value was wrong, then mom would know that the value is wrong and something needed to happen. And all of a sudden there was this complete change in security, safety, and feeling of comfort in the family. So that was one simple example that really opened my eyes to this little connected device.
Next question.
I have a question. As far as monetization opportunities for mobile devices, do you believe greater opportunities are on the devices side or the infrastructure side? Because listening to you, I obviously admire your knowledge. I'm under the impression that focusing on the device itself would bring us back to the PC era where we would soup it up to the supercomputer that would be oversized and could do everything, but wouldn't have this necessity to do that everything. I feel that small thin clients that we would wear all over the body talking to the very sophisticated infrastructure would bring greater value, which Fitbit and some other active metering devices are already proving. Do you feel that technology is there already to create this network, or we still have to wait for more sophisticated technology that will still enhance just wearable device to get us to that level?
Nikhil.
Yeah, so I have to tell you the story of my 14-year-old daughter. Okay, so 14-year-old, yesterday she wanted to make a band that would talk, a band she wore and another band somebody else wore and they would talk. And actually it was surprisingly simple how quickly you could do
get the
something.
mic in front.
How quickly you could do something like that. And essentially if you took an Arduino board with the BTLE shield, you can download an open source iPhone app, and you do 2 of those, and very soon you have lights. You press a button, it lights up on the other side, you press the button. So I think what's interesting is that software has become almost, you can't charge you for it, it's almost free. The back-end systems on Amazon, you can bring up a server really easily. So the real opportunity left is the ability to sell somebody something. So you might be selling a hardware piece, but it's actually the value is somewhere else, either in software or in systems. In my mind, I think as things progress and with these 3D tools and 3D printers, I mean, you go to Maker Place in town and you can pretty much, you have laser cutters and 3-axis, NC machines, and you can do a lot of things with your hands. So I think that in 3 to 5 years, a lot of people will be building things that are very simple, using off-the-shelf components, and the value will come from service, but they'll be selling some little piece. But this is my opinion.
Martin.
I would like to get back to this question about the killer app, because I want to know what I have integrated out of what this group has said. If what you say is right, and you have a biological chart that will let a person who follows the rules for them live another 20 years? And that chart is tailored, and it's tailored based upon measurements that are made. And Ramesh, you have taught me about devices that will measure your sleep patterns and all these other things. And then you integrate that chart that's optimized with the device that Sunil describes that will remind you of what your habits ought to be all the time. And boy, if that isn't a killer app, I don't know what is.
We're still in stealth mode.
I can live another 20 years.
Marty, that's what my friend is going to do, Royan, the physician. That's his goal.
Do you want to join our board?
Well, but I have a question for the physicians. There's several here. And when I was in Qualcomm, I wasn't allowed to speak about this. RF, they're putting Bluetooth Smart in everything. Now I'm going to wear it. Now Ramesh, maybe you can lead off with, you're going to put people's minds at rest, and Royan and other physicians can say what milliwatts, microwatts, and this may come back to your small cells that you are doing 1000x improvement, maybe Nikhil in Qualcomm. But RF at such levels, or cumulative, is there something I need to be worried about?
No one's saying anything, huh?
I promise that's not the last question. I wouldn't end on that down.
So I'll respond to your question from a very personal perspective. So I've been playing with these devices for about 6 years now, wearing them pretty much non-stop, and experimenting with how does that really affect my behavior. And what I find is that ultimately the goal is to get rid of all these sensors. Yeah. Right? It retrains you. It's like training wheels on a bike that you're learning to ride for the first time. Once you calibrate, what's healthy, you don't need all these devices. You return to them once in a way to kind of recalibrate yourself. So I think the ultimate goal is to not have all these things hanging off of you all the time.
So all your research is for nothing.
You need it, but not all the time. The other thing I would tell you, again from personal experience, is anything that you attach to your body, you really have to protect your body in the sense that even a little bit of irritation, a little bit of annoyance will bug you if you wear it 24 hours a day, right? And so the design of these things you really have to pay a lot of attention. So here's my strangest story. This is a true one, but don't quote me on this. Some years ago, body bugs were all the rage, right? And I wore a body bug on me. It goes around your triceps for about 2 or 3 years, pretty much, except when I was in the shower. I have tons of data. And then once I sort of injured myself, I don't know what I was doing in a yoga class or something, and I sort of inflamed the nerve. And after a while, I realized that this inflamed nerve was sort of terminating in that device. It's kind of like a weird, spooky feeling. I concluded, again, my own anecdotal personal feedback is that your brain tries to make sense of things that are attached to your body. It's just what the brain likes to do. So at some level, it was sort of like had become part of my body in the wrong sense. I got rid of it. I still have it, but I don't use it anymore, right? So I think ultimately, if you've retrained yourself, you won't need these sensors.
Well, my eye got used to the Google Glass, and Sunil, we need to counter on that particular part. You wore it for 4 or 5 years, right?
Well, I haven't worn the glass for 4 or 5 years, but the other device I wore, yes, for definitely for several years. Yes, they can be very uncomfortable if they're not designed right, and I agree. A lot of these are nerds tools that nerds create for nerds. I mean, there's actually a school of thought in terms of how what are the kind of weights and requirements that you need to do to put these things. One of it comes from what zoologists put on animals. They're wearable instruments that they put for sensing them. In terms of for humans, I mean, one thing and I've let a lot of people wear my Google Glass, and one thing I found, and this is not scientific by any means, if you've worn glasses before, these things are actually reasonably comfortable. If you've never worn glasses before, you're going to get a headache within 5 minutes. Now, I don't know, for those of you who wear glasses, if you remember back to the first time you wore glasses, it was probably pretty uncomfortable for the initial time. So I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that our bodies do adapt to these things. But now we're talking about putting these things in other places. I know one of the things when we were working on for research is putting, not necessarily having these things as appendages like this, but it being part of your clothes. Why not integrate these things into things we already wear? This is a very odd instrument, but what if it's just it's part of my normal glasses? And I think that's what they're trying to do. Contact lens may be pretty provocative, I'd say, but I think you can get very far just by integrating it with the things we're already accustomed to wearing, because we've already created those brain pathways, as you said, to become accustomed to wearing clothes.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify.
Just 1 minute because we are being
Okay.
asked to stop.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when I said not for nerds, I said sometimes. Plus I am a nerd. But
No, I agree with you. Not about your art.
Sure. So the other thing is, for clothes, what I studied that, and it has huge potential, but you have to be able to wash it in the washing machine without destroying the electronics. And I know it's a challenge, but it's being solved. And the last thing, about the contact lens, I don't know if it has radio waves, but I know an ophthalmologist presented to me a contact lens that measures blood pressure in the eye, which is important for glaucoma. And he told me that he wasn't allowed to put RF, so what happens, you wear the contact lens the whole day, and then once you are done, you can put it in a machine that would take all the measurements. So sometimes you don't have to have real-time information all the time, and I don't think RF is safe in the eye.
Well, I hope you saw a balanced thing. We are geeks, but we are also aware of, and each of the panelists has shown that they're also aware of both sides of it. There's real experience behind it, there's research behind it. So I'm glad, thank you very much for coming to this. Thank you, panelists, and we have a few gifts. Our president's bringing it, but while he's bringing that out, don't forget to take a look at the yellow flyer. This is Deepa Prahlad back there. She's a published Harvard Business Review author and has written a book, her talk, Winning in the Workplace with Design, next time.
On behalf of TiE, I'd like to thank all the panelists. We've got little presents for them. Thank you all for coming. Have a lovely
Oh, sorry.